That slope was safe 8 days earlier. It was safe 2 weeks after. People rode it in December, and people rode it in March, dozens of them, on the same line, through the same chute, and nothing happened to any of them. Because nothing was wrong with that mountain. There was no cliff hidden under the snow, no crevasse, no rotten cornice, no feature of that terrain that killed anybody. 4 people dropped into a slope that was, in every sense a person can see, completely ordinary. And the thing that was going to kill one of them was buried about 2 feet under the surface, spread across the entire face like a sheet of glass. And it had been put there 3 weeks before by a clear, cold night. This is the story of the one hazard in the outdoors that has almost nothing to do with where you are, and almost everything to do with when. And of why the man who knew that slope better than anyone alive was the least equipped person on the mountain to judge it. Welcome to Sunk Cost. The names in this story are invented, but the danger is entirely real. Drawn from the way avalanches actually kill people in the backcountry every winter, and from the fact that in the great majority of those cases, the avalanche was triggered by the victim or somebody standing near them. There were 5 of them, all in their 30s and 40s, out of Boise, on a backcountry day in a range they all knew well. The one who led was named Dane Whitcomb, 43, and he was, by a distance, the most experienced rider in the group. That is the entire story, and it is worth being clear about it up front. Dane had been riding that particular chute for 20 years. He knew where the rocks were under the snow in a thin year. He knew where the wind loaded the entrance and where the entrance narrowed and how the runout curled left into the drainage at the bottom. He knew the approach so well he did not need a map for it. When friends wanted to ride that zone, they asked Dane, and Dane took them, and it had gone well every single time for 2 decades. He knew that mountain. What he did not know, and had never learned, was snow. Those are 2 entirely different bodies of knowledge, and almost nobody in the backcountry understands that they are separate, because they feel like the same thing. Knowing a mountain is geography. It is a static, learnable, permanent set of facts about a place, and Dane's version of it was excellent. Snow is meteorology. It is a structure that gets rebuilt every winter, changes week to week, and can turn the identical piece of terrain from harmless to lethal and back again several times in a season. To understand what happened in that chute, you have to understand 3 things, and the first one explains why this hazard is so different from everything else covered on this channel. A snowpack is not a substance. It is a structure, built in layers, all winter long. Every storm lays down a new layer, with its own density and character. And those layers sit on top of each other for months. And sometimes, between 2 of those layers, there is a weak one. Here is how the worst kind gets made. A clear, cold, calm stretch of weather in midwinter, especially with a thin snowpack, drives strong temperature gradients through the snow. And that process grows large, angular, poorly bonded crystals, either at the surface as surface hoar, which is essentially frost, or deeper as faceted grains. These crystals are the opposite of what you want. They are loose, sugary, and have almost no ability to bond to each other or to anything else. Then the next storm comes, and it lays a dense, cohesive slab of new snow directly on top of that layer of loose crystals. What you now have on the mountain is a heavy, rigid plate resting on ball bearings. That layer can sit there for weeks. It gets buried deeper. It stops being visible. It stops being detectable by anything you can feel through your feet. And it waits. Forecasters call this a persistent slab problem, and it is the thing that kills the most experienced people in avalanche terrain, precisely because it does not announce itself, and because the slope looks and skis exactly like it always has. And when it fails, it does not fail in a small way. A rider's weight breaks the weak layer at one point. The fracture propagates across that layer, faster than a person can react. And the entire slab above the fracture line releases at once, sometimes hundreds of feet wide. Which means the crucial question in avalanche country is never, is this slope dangerous? It is, what is inside the snow today? The same chute, in the same conditions of steepness and aspect and shape, is a fine run in January and a death trap in February. And the difference is invisible from the surface. The second thing is the one that decides whether an avalanche is a scare or a funeral. And hardly anybody outside the sport has ever heard of it. Plenty of people get caught in avalanches and walk away. They get carried, they get knocked around, they end up sitting in debris with a wrenched knee and a story. What separates those people from the ones who die is very often not the size of the slide. It is what was underneath them when it stopped. Avalanche professionals call it a terrain trap. It is any feature at the bottom of a slope that concentrates the debris instead of spreading it out. A gully, a creek bed, a narrow chute, a depression at the base of a face, a road cut, trees or rocks at the bottom that a person gets carried into. The physics is simple and brutal. The same volume of moving snow spread across a wide open apron buries a person to the waist. Funneled into a gully 30 feet wide, that snow stacks up 8, 10, 12 feet deep, and the person inside it is somewhere in the middle of that. And here is the detail that makes this story what it is. The features that create terrain traps are, very often, the exact features that make a line worth riding. Chutes hold the best snow. Gullies are the natural fall line. The tight, sculpted, beautiful part of the mountain that an experienced rider steers toward because it skis better than anything else is frequently the same geometry that will bury them deepest if the slope lets go. The third thing is what happens to a person in avalanche debris, and it is the reason the clock in this story is so short. Moving avalanche snow behaves like a fluid. The instant it stops, it does the opposite. The pressure and friction of the slide, combined with the immediate refreezing at the grain contacts, cause it to set hard, and it happens in seconds. People who have been buried describe it identically. You cannot move a finger. You cannot expand your chest against it. Whatever position your body was in when the snow stopped is the position you are in until somebody digs you out. That is why the advice to make an air pocket in front of your face has to be executed in the last second of motion, because after that, there is no moving anything. Then there is the air. Snow has air in it, so a buried person can breathe for a while. But every exhalation is warm and wet, and it melts the snow immediately around the mouth and refreezes it into a solid mask of ice, an ice lens. Once that forms, the person is rebreathing their own carbon dioxide in a sealed space. The survival numbers are the most important thing in this video. If a completely buried person is dug out within roughly the first 10 to 15 minutes, their odds are very good, on the order of most of them living. After that, the curve falls off a cliff, and by the half-hour mark, the majority are gone. Now put that next to a simple fact about mountains. No organized rescue on Earth reaches a backcountry burial in 15 minutes. Not a helicopter, not a patrol, not a search team. Which means the only people who can save a buried person are the ones standing on the slope with them, right now, carrying a transceiver, a probe, and a shovel, and knowing how to use all three without thinking. Everything else is body recovery. The person who tried to stop them was not standing at a trailhead. He was in the group. His name was Emmett Sarr, 36, a working mountain guide who had been invited along by one of the others. And what he did that morning was more than any ranger in any story on this channel has ever been able to do. He did not just warn them, he showed them. At the truck, he pulled up the avalanche forecast and read it out loud. Considerable danger, persistent slab problem, buried weak layer roughly 2 feet down, human-triggered avalanches likely on steep, wind-loaded slopes. 14 inches of new snow in the previous 3 days, sitting on a layer formed during a long, clear, cold spell in January. Then, partway up, on a safe, low-angle bench with the same aspect and elevation as the chute, he dug a pit. He cut a clean wall down through the snowpack and showed them the layers in cross-section, and about 2 feet down there was a band of loose, sparkly, sugary crystals that would not hold together in his palm. He isolated a column and tapped it lightly from the wrist. The block sheared off the weak layer and slid, clean and smooth as a pane of glass sliding off a table. Everybody standing there saw it happen. Dane Whitcomb watched the block slide, and he was not rude about it, and he did not say the test was wrong. He simply put it next to 20 years of his own experience and found his own experience heavier. He said, "I've been riding this chute for 20 years. It's never slid on me once." There are 2 things inside that sentence, and they are the reason experienced people die in avalanches at a higher rate than beginners. The first is that he was assigning risk to a location when the variable was a date. His mental model was, this slope is safe, an attribute of a place, permanent and learnable, the same way a rock is hard. But no slope has a fixed safety rating. What a slope has is a condition today, and today's condition is a function of every storm and every cold, clear night since November. Dane's 20 years of knowledge described the geometry of that chute perfectly and told him absolutely nothing about the sheet of faceted crystals sitting 2 feet under his board that morning. The second is subtler, and it is what those 20 years actually built. Every time a person rides a questionable slope and nothing happens, the memory of getting away with it lowers the bar a little for next time. Do that for 2 decades, and the bar is on the floor. And it feels like expertise, because it is made of real experience. Sociologists call this normalization of deviance. 20 seasons without an avalanche was not 20 seasons of safety. It was 20 seasons in which the weak layer and his arrival never landed on the same day. And none of those seasons contained any information about what was in the snow on this particular morning. And now, the part that matters most, because it is the part that repeats in nearly every one of these accidents. 3 other people were standing at that pit. 2 of them had a bad feeling. Neither said anything. They did not stay quiet because they were fools. They stayed quiet because the most experienced person present had made a call. Because nobody wants to be the one who ruins the day, and because when a group defers to an authority, the individual members stop evaluating and start following. That is the actual point of no return in this story, and it was not the moment Dane dropped in. It was the moment 3 people decided not to say the thing they were thinking, on a bench, in the sunshine, with a demonstration of the problem sitting in the snow in front of them. The 5th member of the group was a man named Bo Ferreira, 39, and he did not go into the chute. He had new boots, and he had lost feeling in his toes on the way up, and he decided to take the low-angle tree run back to the truck and get the heater going. That was his entire reasoning. He heard the same forecast, watched the same block slide off the same weak layer, and left because his feet were cold. The morning gave them every confirmation they wanted. The sky was flawless. The first lap down a mellow, treed slope was superb, and nothing moved. On the way up, they could see tracks across the basin on another face, other people out riding, which felt like evidence, and was not, because tracks only ever show you the parties for whom it did not go wrong. And once, on the traverse in, the snow under them went whoomph. That sound is the single most direct warning in all of avalanche safety. It is the noise of a weak layer collapsing under your weight across a wide area. The sound of the exact failure mechanism happening beneath your feet and not quite propagating. Emmett Sarr said it out loud. That is the layer. That is what we dug up. Somebody laughed at the noise. Nobody turned around. Dane went first to show the line. He made 3 turns, and on the 4th, the mountain fractured above him, a crown line running the full width of the chute, and everything below it started moving at once. Survivors of these events say the same thing every time. It does not feel like snow sliding. It feels like the ground itself ceasing to be a fixed object. He tried to ride out to the rocks on the left, and there was no time. And the chute did what a chute does, which is take everything it is carrying and deliver it to the narrowest point. And the narrowest point was the drainage at the bottom, the terrain trap that Emmett had pointed at from above. We are not going to describe the rest of it. The slide ran, and then it stopped, and the thing everybody remembers is the silence. A moment of enormous noise, and then a completely quiet mountain, with the debris field sitting in the bottom of the drainage, looking almost tidy. What happened next was 15 minutes long, and it was the only part of this day that could still be changed. 3 people were on the slope with transceivers. All 3 switched to search. And here the day came apart a second time, because 2 of those 3 had not practiced with their gear in over a year. They knew the theory, they fumbled the execution. There were seconds lost getting into search mode, more seconds lost misreading distance numbers, a stretch of time spent walking the wrong direction on a signal. Emmett Saar ran the search. He got a signal, worked it down, and got a probe strike. That unmistakable soft contact at the end of the pole that is not rock and not ground. The probe read a depth that told him everything about how this was going to go. Then came the part nobody trains for, and everyone should. Digging a person out from that depth is not shoveling. It is moving tons of set snow, and doing it wrong wastes the only resource they had left. The correct technique is to start downhill of the probe and cut in horizontally toward it, moving snow sideways and out rather than digging a vertical shaft straight down and then having to lift every shovel load up out of a hole. That single difference can cut the time in half. 2 of the 3 had never heard of it, and they started digging a pit straight down. Bo Ferreira, down at the trucks with his boots off, heard the slide and called it in. And that call was correct and necessary and irrelevant to the outcome, which was going to be decided long before anybody else arrived. They reached Dane Whitcomb at just past the 25-minute mark. He had not been injured by the slide in any serious way. He had been buried deep in the trap with his airway sealed by the ice lens that forms around a buried person's mouth. He did not survive. One other rider, a woman named Sabine Kroll, had been caught at the edge of the moving snow and deposited near the margin of the debris on the open apron rather than in the drainage. She was buried to just under the surface, found in about 4 minutes, and dug out alive with a fractured wrist and severe cold. Same avalanche, same slope. The difference between her outcome and his was where the terrain put them. 200 feet from the crown line, still standing open in the snow where Emmett Saar had cut it that morning, was the pit. A clean vertical wall with the layers of the whole winter visible in it, and about 2 feet down, a distinct band of loose, faceted crystals, plainly visible to anybody who walked over and looked. The rescue team photographed it for the report. It is the clearest possible picture of a warning that was delivered, demonstrated, physically excavated, and set aside. There is nothing rare about the shape of this. Avalanches kill people in the American backcountry every winter. The overwhelming majority of those avalanches are triggered by the victim or their party, and a strikingly large share of the dead are experienced, not beginners. People with years in the mountains, riding terrain they know intimately, on a day when the snow was different from the way it had been the last 100 times they were there. The practical version, as compactly as it can be said. Avalanche danger is a property of the day, not of the slope. So read the forecast for that morning and understand the problem it names. A slope you have ridden 100 times tells you nothing about today. Wumping sounds and shooting cracks in the snow are the mountain telling you the weak layer is failing right now, and they mean go home. Look at what is below a slope, not just at the slope, because a gully or creek bed turns a survivable ride into a deep burial. Expose one person at a time while everybody else watches from safe ground. Carry a transceiver, probe, and shovel, and practice with them every season. Because the search is a skill that decays fast, and you will be executing it in the worst 10 minutes of your life. Learn to dig properly, from downhill and in, not straight down. And understand the number that governs everything. Rescue comes from the people standing next to you, because organized help does not arrive inside the survival window. Bo Ferreira has said, more than once, that he cannot stand being described as the smart one. He is not a cautious person. He watched the same block of snow shear off the same weak layer that everyone else watched, and it did not change his mind about anything. And he went back to the truck because his feet were cold in new boots. That is the whole distance between him and a man he had ridden with for 11 years. Emmett Sarr still guides.
He still digs pits, and he still shows people the layers. And he has changed what he says afterward because he learned that showing people the problem is not the same as changing their minds. Now, when somebody tells him how many years they have been riding a particular line, he gives them the answer he arrived at that winter. He knew that chute better than anybody alive, he says. That was never the question. The chute is not what changes. The snow is, and he never once looked inside it.